just to bring those up. Thank
There's
you.
absolutely a lot of things to consider and a lot of different options to look at, but I think it needs to be looked at.
Well, I think, real simply, I mean, you've heard it. I don't think we have to take any formal motion or anything. You can start that investigation.
Okay, we will do that.
If I remember right from last year, isn't it that there has to be there's a lag time if you wanted to close?
Yes.
An elementary school? That's significant, so this really has to be done in the next few months if we're gonna do this.
Yeah, to decommission a building.
Yes.
Well,
Attorney
decommission a building
Freud.
if you're going to.
Vacate it.
Not so much the decommissioning a building. The significant lag time is if you're gonna close the building and lay off staff
Vacate it.
in the building. That's the extra long lag time. And if there's any thought about that, we need to look at that right away. But if you're just gonna close the building, it basically requires a hearing with.
I think we should look at all options.
I don't think the intent would be just to mothball it, it would probably be to sell it eventually.
No, I mean sell it. I mean, the long lag time comes in if you're gonna close the building and lay off the staff
Of that building.
of that building, right?
Thank you.
I think it would be helpful for us to know what percentage of each building is being used. You
Yeah.
know, some buildings are, like Bill said, just, chestnuts at the seams, and other buildings have maybe a whole second level.
Yes.
That isn't being used at all. So, that really needs to be taken into consideration here.
A simple percent capacity with how many students could be absorbed.
We actually have that. Henry
Oh, you do?
updated that not too long ago,
Mm-hmm.
based on the functional capacity of each building.
We went to every school and we looked at the capacity. We started last year doing
It's a
that.
formula from the state, the
Well-
functional capacity.
I think Henry gave that to us when we were touring through some of the buildings a year ago. He went over
correct.
each one, what the capacity was, what the utilization and everything else.
It was
He had
updated
a couple of
with
different
the
charts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was updated this year with.
Yeah, because it
the
fluctuated a little bit,
Yes,
yes.
Mr. President, I think that's excellent, but I think our first right now is the budget. I mean, let's not use a shotgun approach and look at too many things at one time. We have an obligation to the taxpayers to look at the budget. And Bill is 100% right. I use the term, education for versus intoxication. If the state sells all the buildings, we will get $1 billion if they put them up. We make profit from those buildings, $500 million a year. That means that in 2 years, we would have exhausted the $1 billion, and there would be none of that money cut off for education, which some of it is. So we get $1 billion in 1 year, it lasts this year and next year, say, and then after that, we get nothing in, where we're getting $500 million every year right now. And some of that's going to education. And so we are really going to get, really sliced again. And every slice means that we have a major problem with our budget.
Dr.
Right.
Morgano, at the beginning, you talked about the budget and our obligation to the taxpayers and maybe putting off the building situation.
Right.
But isn't our obligation to the taxpayers to look at every way possible without hurting education, hurting the kids, to look at ways to balance the budget so we're not putting it on them?
Right.
So with that being said, wouldn't it be in the taxpayers' best interest for us to start looking at the consolidation and look at other things to do to get the deficits down and move forward?
Absolutely, but I'm trying to say that right now, our first goal is to balance our budget, or to get a budget that we could put before the taxpayers and vote on. I'm not saying that it's wrong to do that. I think that's a fantastic idea.
I think
But
we're capable,
I
I
don't-
think our administration is capable to do more things than.
Well, but the problem is that if you go through any courses,
Absolutely.
they'll tell you, set so many goals
So,
and follow those goals through. Now, this is something that we're just
Well-
coming up with.
Huh?
And in just coming up with it, we're gonna say, okay, let's drop these couple things and look at this.
Well, the administration's gonna move ahead, so
Right.
we'll go from there.
These are
Yeah.
things that should have been
So-
done years ago.
Yeah, oh, I agree
the
with
board
you.
never moved on
But,
anything.
but not in a budget crisis right now. Let's
Well.
get the budget done, and then we have time to look at these. This isn't gonna happen overnight.
Okay.
To be continued.
Any other comments? If not, anybody in the public that wants to address the board? Looks like Jenna's wandering up.
Here we are again. Every year, again, like Groundhog Day. Chose got married on Groundhog Day for good reason. I think, Mr. Semineta, you said something tonight that is key for me, is that we're not decimating programs. I think if you want honest conversation about what the cuts did to programs last year, I'm more than willing to sit down and talk to you, and I'm sure there's tons of teachers that would like to share. Cuts hurt kids, and I can tell you that every day I see things that are being impacted by cuts. I openly talk with people about it. We problem solve with ways to get around it, the ways to provide the best for our kids. They get one shot at this. You have kids who are entering kindergarten, by the time they're in third grade, may still be struggling readers because their interventions are gone. You have kids who are at the 7th and 8th grade level. We're not able to provide them with the intense interventions that we once were. We, in some cases, are not doing what's right for our kids. What I'm asking is for transparency through this process. When we talk about cuts, what are those cuts, and looking at the impact of how they're going to impact the kids. As a parent, I need to advocate for, not for my own children, but for children who I'm not their parent in this district, but I have friends who their children are in this district. Our kids are not, we are not doing more with less. We are doing less with less. And if you want to have an open conversation about what that looks like on an everyday basis, again, I'm more than willing to discuss it. It's not anything I haven't said to, in conversations with Mr. First, Mr. Castrovinci, even with Mr. Simonetta. Cuts have real impacts. And I like that you are focusing on not decimating programs. We sat here tonight and talked about 4 years of math and science at the high school. It's critical. You need to have qualified individuals to be able to teach those courses as well. This weekend, I had the opportunity to listen to a 2002 grad talk about how Easton did right by him. He's now working in Washington, D.C. for Chris Matthews. He went on for about a half hour on the things that Easton did right to prepare him for school. I'd hate to see that legacy lost. So, again, I'm asking for transparency. If you want honest conversation, more than willing to have it with you, but the offer's out there on the table.
Ms. Moorhead?
Yes.
Quick question or comment. I appreciate what you said, and I'm sure you have a couple hundred people we can talk to in the district.
650 some odd.
Yeah.
And, our role, I think, is a little different than your role. You're looking after the teachers. You're looking after children. As a board member, we're trying to look after the children, the teachers, and the taxpayers. So as you have children that might not be able to read where they should, all the resources that they have at school are great, but when they go home and they need to practice their reading and they don't have lights, which is a real scenario, and I can take you to those people as well, and I know you know some of them,
Well aware.
because taxes have continued to increase every year while people are still struggling to find work, it hurts them. And it hurts children, I'm sure you know as an educator, when they go home or before they come to school and they don't have breakfast because they couldn't afford it, or there's no heat in the winter. So the teacher's job is very important, but we also need to make sure that the kids are continuing what they're learning in school at home.
And we do
and-
bridge that gap quite often. I mean, I know you know the amount of time that,
There definitely is a bridge there. Unfortunately, the bridge isn't big enough to reach everybody.
and it's not just those kids who can't read, it's those kids who can read and excel at
absolutely
reading
right.
and excel at math, and are we doing our best by them as well?
And I understand that. So, but what I'm trying to say is, by us doing our best, we have to think about it in the buildings and also out of the buildings. And no matter how hard we work for the kids in the school, if they can't get a good meal when they get home, if they don't have light or hot water to take a bath, the most that we do in the building.
Point
isn't for
noted,
much.
and our friends in Allentown and Bethlehem who dealt with cuts over the past several years that have completely decimated their programs. They've been on warning lists for lists that we're not even on warning for. Allentown and Bethlehem schools are on. Kids are being offered opportunity to go to different schools because their schools are so underperforming. They didn't raise taxes, and now they are in the practice of raising taxes. Bethlehem's got themselves out of a giant hole. And I get it. I get the picture. However, we get one shot at educating these children, and as an educator, it's my responsibility to also advocate for the best interest
I
educationally.
totally agree, but I think to really educate a child 100%, it needs to be done in the schools and at home. I think it takes both places. And if we're raising taxes, people can't afford to pay them. We're only providing half of that education.
Mr. President, point of order.
Yes.
Yeah, the item we're on is public to be heard
Yep.
on finance issues, not a debate on issues. Can we
Correct.
continue with our?
That's fine, you're
You're
correct.
absolutely right, but
So,
I
okay.
have, wait a minute, wait. I have to comment on that. School board, local offices like this is the only time people in the community and members, elected officials, get to communicate. Now, for years as a member of the community, I watched people get up and comment, and I saw the board just sit there like the people had three heads and never say a word. That's not what we were elected to do. You can engage in conversation. I think that the conversation, the exchange was respectful. But I think to sit there and just keep your mouth shut, we've seen the school district do that for years, and it's ridiculous. So I think debate back and forth is needed, and local government is the only chance you have to have that happen.
But it's the venue. If you want to have a debate on things, then you schedule a debate.
No, it's not a debate.
This is not the agenda that we're under.
Yeah, when you're at the board meeting, this is for the board business, it's not for the debate with the public. Those things would be scheduled separately if you want to do that.
Well, I will continue to do what I'm doing, and, I mean, you'll have to throw me out or whatever you have to do, because it's ridiculous when people make statements or comments or concerns, and the board just sits at them like, looks at them like they're idiots. That's ridiculous, and it's
Yeah.
disrespectful.
Okay, any other comments?
I move we adjourn.
Okay, we have an
Yeah,
executive
question.
session
Now, we need
afterwards.
summary first.
I have one comment. You know, I think we'd be wise to listen to Ms. Broadhead's plea for transparency. And one thing that Mr. Simonetti can do at the next meeting is put down the contracted obligations that we have and those increases in those obligations so that we can do a better job planning and have everyone understand where this deficit is coming from.
Okay, any other comments? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Again, executive session. Well, they're going to head out.